Hello and good evening, everybody, and welcome to Noble Manhattan's Child and Adolescent Coaching Support Group. And this month even, we are delighted that Stuart Blakeledge from The Root of It has joined us. Stuart is a mentor, and a number of us think of mentoring or coaching. And so I thought it would be a good plan to bring a mentor in rather than talk to coaches, rather than us just discussing it, to hear his side of it and to also hear what is going on in his area, which really is mental health in schools. So very, very pertinent. I met Stuart at the TES SEND show, the Special Educational Needs and Disabilities show, and that was really good. And I see that there's an opportunity here that we can sort of learn from each other as we go. So, Stuart, welcome. And
thank you very much for having me.
I'm glad you brought your knowledge along with you, because you've just been explaining a tremendous amount of things to me as we discuss autism and other things. But tell me, what has been your pathway to your present position, as it were?
Well, good evening. Thank you very much for having me along. So I currently work as a mentor, and I have other roles within The Root of It, which I'll go into a bit later on. But I have 15 years experience in the care industry, particularly in the learning difficulties background and working with SEN students. I've worked as an activities coordinator, not an art therapist, but an arts session coordinator, which is basically an unqualified art therapist. Work with creating musical sessions, sensory sessions, and that sort of thing. So basically, I've been sort of working in a sort of therapeutic session with all kinds of clients, from schools, care homes, working in day services, and various other settings for about 15 years. And then I started working with The Root of It about 2 years ago, where and also before I came here, I also worked at Solent University as an academic mentor as well, working with students with various sort of, not necessarily learning difficulties, but just students who required a little bit of assistance. And that was as varied as the students themselves, from note taking to providing a safe space session, allow them to communicate what issues were affecting them, or just giving them a space where they can put together their schedules into a better order and work through their dissertations and such. Since then, I've now worked at the Root of It for 2 years, where I work predominantly as a mentor, working with people. I've worked with some veterans to help them with employability skills, but also dealing with some severe mental health issues, including PTSD, as well as other anxieties and just general well-being and self-confidence building back into employment. I've worked with people with learning difficulties. I've worked with people in small businesses and various other sort of situations with my mentoring abilities, using all my experiences working with lots of different individuals with different kinds of needs to sort of help people achieve the goals that they want to set. As well as that, I work with the reason that Ian and I first met is we were chatting about the mental health show that our organization, The Root of It, puts together, where we work with mental health leads across UK schools, and our organization provides the training program and the syllabus for mental health leads in the schools across the UK. And we've been chatting about how we bring those leads together, bring more support in the form of conversations like this one, and various other meetings and offline meetings, as well as ones online, and culminating in a sort of in a SEN, similar to the SEN show, but our own version of a sort of a show, an exhibition with seminars, and how we can bring people together. So my journey's been a bit all over the place, but bouncing around, picking up really relevant experience has led me to sort of be the mentor and the person I am today. So it's been an interesting journey, and a bit looks at first glance, it looked like it didn't seem to make sense and a bit meandering as a journey, but it seems to have reached the right place in the end.
Oh, that's magic, Stuart. Now, you've used the word mentor quite a lot of times, which is not surprising, because this is what it's about. But what do you understand by mentoring? What is it that a mentor does, and how does he do it, or she?
I think a mentor is a person that's basically acting as a sort of a mirror to their mentee to guide the mentee with as a lighter touch as possible for them to realize what their own limitations are, what their skills are, and work out how to manage their limitations and overcome them, but also how to utilize their skills to basically progress to achieve whatever goal they want to be, using all kinds of different approaches, from sometimes, rarely, but I have had to use teaching skills, some coaching skills, but most of the time it's about sort of trying to let them come, using the coaching idea of letting them make the decision and come to the conclusion and work the issue out themselves, even though I could quite easily, well, sometimes may easily be able to solve the issue for them by doing it for the mentee. The idea is that they learn to solve the issue themselves and solve the issue themselves in the future. So I think that's what a mentor does. It's facilitating their learner, their mentee, dealing with their issues themselves in the future without the support of the mentor.
That's an interesting way of looking at it, because it's very difficult the way we've been taught, or I've been taught, that a coach does this and a mentor does that, as almost as sort of two different disciplines. So a mentor sort of imparts experience, whereas a coach is adviceless. And it's and that to me is a lot of the challenge. So what training does a mentor do? Does a mentor need training?
But obviously, my company provides training. So yes, everyone should receive training at all times. But realistically, a mentor is just someone that has the confidence and experience and skills to teach someone. You can mentor another person by understanding what the point of what you're trying to achieve. You can get in-depth training and understand how this works and get all kinds of skill sets and make you a better mentor and understand the nuts and bolts of it. But the basic principle is creating a space for that mentee to develop on their own. Some people may develop a lot of life experience and a lot of practical skills and lateral thinking ability where they will naturally be able to mentor anyway. A lot of people, particularly in our various industries, mentor naturally anyway. But what we do with training allows you to hone that, so you know what you're doing, and you can work with not just people in one field or with your expertise. You can mentor people in industries or with facing challenges that you have very little experience of, but because you're focusing more on the individual rather than the task. Because coaching, I think the main difference between coaching and mentoring is focused around the person. So you can use coaching in a mentoring setting, if that makes sense. But coaching is more about the task. The mentor is more about the individual. So, you can mentor without training. We all do it, but you can mentor really well, and in fact, brilliantly, with the right experience and skills with training.
And how do you train a mentor?
The best way of doing it, obviously, there's with like our company, the root of it provides with our subdivision, I think the word would be said, of our mentoring school company within the company, trains mentors, and we do level 3 accredited mentors. And obviously with any accredited qualification, as particular level 3, there's lots of theory work that goes with it, portfolio work to show the learning you've been through. But the basic nuts and bolts of training someone or teaching someone how to mentor, the first step is to mentor that person. Because I find whenever I'm working with someone, like I've been working with people in the hospitality industry most recently to sort of understand their own workforce more, I can't teach them how to mentor chefs better than they can, because they, like, just using chefs as an example, or bar team, because they know their team better than I ever could by my short sessions. So the end result of that manager, that head chef, whatever, mentoring their team successfully, I need to convince them that it works. So I mentor them to deal with the issues that they're facing, so they can get a practical sense of how it works from the inside. So then they can also see what doesn't work as well, what puts them on edge, what questions or suggestions don't fit. Like, for example, the biggest example I use to show sort of the differences between different environments. If I say to an office worker, we need to focus on reducing your stress, they go, oh yeah, of course, yeah, we want to reduce the stress in an office environment. If I go to a chef and say you need to reduce stress, you will be laughed out of the room, because chefing is 95% stress and probably about 5% swearing. So it's understanding what works for the mentee, and the way you do that is you get them, you teach that mentor what it's like to be a mentee first, get that understanding, and then show them how to basically mentor a mentor through mentoring. I think, if that doesn't sound confusing, but that's the approach that we start off with.
Mentor through mentoring.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I've got that. I hope everybody else has as well. That's fine. I'm just very quickly, I appreciate we've got a multinational audience here tonight. So level 3, can you sort of explain that multinationally? I know it's a UK sort of level base.
So basically the simplest way of saying it, from a level 1 would be an introduction. Level 2 is sort of a professional qualification, and then if you go all the way up to say level 5, that would be level 4 to level 4 is sort of pre-degree level. Level 5 is advanced degree level, I think, in some cases. So level 3 is effectively the sort of qualifications you require for an experienced or senior member of staff, is I think where I would put it.
Senior vocational member. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So that's we've talked now about sort of mentoring in general, and of course we're all here because we're all very interested in supporting school students, both as an intervention method, but also as a prevention method, because a lot of the school students, and I believe this is the same almost the world over, are struggling. They are struggling with some core life skills. They're struggling with anxieties, with self-esteem. They're struggling through, because of COVID, they're struggling even without COVID, through this sort of the speed of communication and the overall awareness of how much information is rushing around the world at light speed. So how can mentors help in schools?
Well, it's the first thing to state before we go any further with mentoring is that it's not going to fix everything. This is the biggest thing we always talk about, is that it's not designed to fix the challenges. It's not designed to fix the concerns. The way that mentoring works is to help the individual to face the challenge themselves, and if not overcome or fix them themselves, because it's about empowering that individual, creating an environment where that person can learn, not just with their mentor, but learn outside of the mentoring sessions to improve, not just with school settings, outside school settings as well. So it's useful for staff as well as students. It's about this idea of also instilling a sense of confidence in a lack of knowledge. I think one of the things that I found personally with my sessions is that not knowing something is not a failure. Willingly being willful of not knowing things, going out of your way to just disregard information, is a stupid thing to do. But not knowing everything about everything from the start is not a problem. It's all right to know that you've got somewhere to go. And mentoring, particularly, I mean, I'm going to use an example with some veterans that I work with, British Army veterans that had been out of work for a long period of time due to various, not just mental health and medical conditions, but just confidence issues. One of the first things we did was basically create a bottom out kind of situation where it can't get, without being too dramatic, it can't get any worse, because the fact is that these guys were thinking that they couldn't achieve anything because they'd failed up to that point, when really unpacking the fact that they had so many things working against them that they felt that it was their fault. When, one chap I worked with literally got blown up and seemed to be blaming himself for his limitations because he had severe injuries and was afraid of it happening again on a subconscious level because he was blown up. And having that session of going almost to a point of saying without saying, it's not your fault you were blown up. That's not on you. You didn't do that deliberately. So we can start to look at how we can overcome that by at first saying, this isn't your problem. This isn't your fault. This is how we move forward. And a simplified version of that with students is, it's not your fault you don't know everything in the world all at once. You're going through a very confusing time, and there are lots of issues weighing down on you that you have no control over. And that starting point, that building of that confidence that goes, no, you're an individual. You look at the world in your way, your unique way. Only you will learn the way you learn. I can help you understand yourself. And then once you start with that, then they can start with confidence setting out either back into the student body or into the student body for the first time, and understand that there's a sense of confidence in where they were, which they didn't have before. And I think that's the most valuable starting point that mentoring could do, and then guide them through further throughout their educational career, I suppose, or educational journey. But there's a starting point. It's that giving them the confidence to begin the journey through their education.
Well, thanks for that. Now, there's been a lot of reports that I'm sort of picking up in the UK sort of press and talking to people, that schools are now looking out for mentors. They're actually advertising for mentors, which is an interesting solution, because, as I say, to me, as a mentor is somebody that somebody else will look up to and provide them with advice, perhaps. How do you see this working?
I think with the correct support, and also the main through that, one of the biggest bits of support. Well, there's two kinds of support that we've advocated as a company, but also I believe in as well. It's one of linking mentors and their experiences together, networking, which is why we're working with the mental health leads. Although uses mentoring, in fact, we train our mental health leads to use mentoring as part of what they do. But it's the same sort of philosophy of bringing them all together, so that at times when they think the whole world sort of it's just them in their school and they're the only ones that are understanding what needs to be done, it's very isolating, can be very lonely for a mental health lead or a mentor. And the other part of that, the other way of dealing with this sort of isolation, is to provide lighter training for those who are being mentored as well. So part of what I said earlier on about when you train a mentor through mentoring, you're showing them what it's like to be mentored. And a lot of the training that we provide when I go into businesses and provide support when we're providing mentoring training, is the biggest thing I try to reiterate is that you're not trying to trick your team. You're not trying to use magical tricks or skills that will bamboozle your staff into telling you their darkest secrets. You're creating a sincere communication with your team, with the person you're mentoring. And what we want to do to help that, because it's a two-way conversation. So you want to also be able to, if you can, find a way of speaking to these mentees and going, and either the mentor training them or through awareness training, for example, is saying, well, the reason they're asking you these questions, the reason you're in these sessions, this is the information they want. This is what they're trying to achieve. So if you understand what they're trying to do and they understand what you're trying to do, getting both sides of the conversation prepared together, that's the best way of supporting a mentor, is if the mentor knows what they're doing, but if we can also, as best we can, help the mentees to know what the whole point is, then we can sort of push forward together.
Thanks. That's great. I may be being slightly cynical here when understanding that UK schools are desperate for money and they're crying out for mentors. Perhaps what they're after are people who are retired or semi-retired, who can give of their time at little or no cost to go in and help out in schools. So whether that is a requirement, whether there's training involved in that, or whether they're expecting people to be just sort of naturally supportive, I've yet to find out. Have you got any knowledge on this one?
It's a valid point, actually, because one of the things that this is with our experience with mental health leads, is that the idea of is this danger of a really good initiative, a really good idea with people that are enthused and motivated to take on the role, being sort of left there because either from higher support or a DFE, Department for Education level, of going, well, we've got these mental health leads in place now, the whole thing's fixed, it'll be fine in 6 months, and then we'll just leave it, and it just slowly collapsing. The idea of mentors being required for schools, and then the idea of getting, but without enough thought to get the right people in place, and it doesn't mean people with like you're saying, with people with experience. Having those people in those positions is really is valuable. They have valuable experience. They have the confidence to be able to understand other situations and bring that knowledge. But if they don't, if the biggest issue with mentoring, where mentoring can fail, is if the safe environment that a mentor tries to create, this sort of safe space, that trusted communication, because it's about trust. You're building up a relationship, not too dissimilar from therapy in some ways, that the idea is this a sincere conversation. But if anything, you have a more sincere, an equal conversation, should I say, than a therapist, because you don't have any kind of superiority to your mentee. You're basically helping them to achieve what they want to do. You're not trying to sort of fix them. You're not trying to use any kind of like I said, like a therapist trying to sort of rebuild a person. You're trying to help them to understand their situation, which they understand better than you ever will, and then they use that skill to move forward. If that part of that trust isn't built in the correct way, or a person who on paper looks like an ideal mentor, like someone with years of experience in a particular field, if they don't know how to build that safe space, if they don't know how to build that communication, if that fundamental part is done wrong, it can make things worse. And I don't mean that in a sort of fear mongering, like you must get training, you must pay loads of money to do it. I mean it as sincerely, because it just doesn't work and it starts to fall apart. The best simplistic example of this is when you hear employers, I know we're talking about in education, but there are lots of sort of parallels of different people I've worked with. When you hear employers say, I have an open door policy, the problem is now, people who don't have an open door policy have said that so much that it's almost a red flag to a lot of people now. The thing is, a manager or a senior member of staff needs to have an open door policy. They need to communicate with their staff. But the problem we have is so many bad people who are rubbish at it have said it for so long that people don't trust it. Like I said, this red flag. So I say to a lot of people I work with that if you need to convince your staff that you have an open door policy, but you can't say it, because if you say it, they won't trust you. You have to build that trust so they know you have an open door policy. And that's the same thing with mentoring, is you have to build that environment. You can't just say platitudes, because so many people have been given this list of platitudes that are things that you should be doing. Like, you can trust me, you can say what we say here won't go any further. But so many people have broken that trust in the past that you have to, it's even more important that when you're building that trust, it's built properly and securely. And with training, with the right knowledge, if you teach the right person, those mentors, to build that space, then it will succeed. But sadly, like you said, with the cynicism, I understand your cynicism about this idea of, we just bring in loads of people with experience, they'll be perfect mentors. On paper, yes, a lot of people may naturally understand that that's almost sacred conversation, that sacred space between a mentor and a mentee. They may get that, but you can have someone with lots of experience that doesn't know a thing about mentoring and may accidentally they may think that mentoring is teaching, where they just explain things to the mentor, or they create the wrong environment. And yeah, I kind of agree that I agree. I have the same sort of cynicism in some ways, that some people that may end up doing more damage because they're put into the wrong place. So I can understand your cynicism.
I think also it's perhaps one of having a sort of a hierarchy within an organization, so that these mentors have someone to go to should they have a particular problem. I mean, I think we can all think of bosses in the past, and in our pasts, some of us probably have more bosses than others, and the open door policy comment is, to me, wonderful, because I can think of several in my naval career who have decreed an open door policy, and us poor juniors would think your door may be open, but I'm not going anywhere
through it.
near
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting situation, and these people, a lot of these people, to set themselves up as somebody who will mentor you,
Mm,
and actually they won't. They will preach to you.
mm.
Do as I, and do it as I do it, rather than actually get alongside. Which perhaps in the armed forces is one of those things which actually you don't want. You do actually want to for people to do as you tell them to, particularly if you're in a position of senior leadership. But it's intriguing that to me you're putting a softer touch, if you like, to what I understood as mentoring, which in a way I'm rather delighted at, because I think one can almost be sort of autocratic as a mentor, which to me wouldn't work. But to hear the slightly softer approach is quite interesting. You may know that it seems that certainly in the UK that the teaching profession embraced coaching about 10, 15 years ago. Unfortunately, they embraced all the wrong elements of it, and effectively it was probably closer to mentoring, but it still ended up as part of the evaluation process, which most coaches would say, oh fuck, no, you can't do that. And with due justification. And so there became a euphemism that a teacher who was being coached was somebody who was not achieving the objectives.
It's an interesting thing, like when working with clients, is that discussion about whether a person needs mentoring, coaching, or teaching. But then again, this isn't just general, like this individual needs to have a mentor, this individual needs a coach, this individual needs a teacher. It's depending on task, challenge, objective, whatever the situation is understanding what that person actually needs. Some people need teaching, particularly like using a really big generalization of younger students, say primary school children. A lot of the subjects you teach with them, you need to teach, where basically you're effectively, well, like the word says, you're a teacher. You're broadcasting 90% of the time, or 90 to 95% of the time. You get a little bit of feedback from them, and then you learn that way. Coaching is a case of, it's more of a sort of, it's still predominantly from the coach, but you're trying to get the student to sort of, or the coachee, however you want to refer to them to understand that they know the answer, and the coaches effectively go, instead of going 2 + 2 is 2, you're sort of going 2 + 2 is, in the past we've looked at it, this is the 2 times table we've discussed in the past, so remember that. And you know that they know the answer, you're trying to encourage them to give you the answer. When a mentor is effectively even further back, when it's sort of like, well, sometimes you need coaching, sometimes you need teaching, but under the umbrella of mentoring. But most of the time the end result is effectively the mentor is saying as little as possible, not because they're not involved, but the idea is that you know the answer, you know the question. Effectively, tell me the question. Right, I need to find out what 2 + 2 is. Do you know the answer to it? Probably. Well, probably. Let's have a look into it. Like, tell me what you need. What's the difficulty facing you? And they sort the sum out themselves, while you're giving them the confidence, pointing in the right direction. But you're not even discussing what the actual question is. You're getting them to tell you. The question is irrelevant almost. It's, you're helping them understand their own process to get to the answer. Does that make sense, or is that a lot of waffle? I don't know. I'm worried that I'm waffling a lot.
To me, it makes sense. What about anybody else? Is that thumbs up? Okay, fine. Thumbs. Yeah. So there you go, Stuart. You can relax a bit. Cool. So we're now actually sort of getting into sort of the coaching mentoring blend, aren't we? Are we perhaps talking about the same subject under 2 different headings?
Sort of. I think it's sort of, there are a lot of crossovers. Mentors use a lot of coaching, and when coaching, you may end up changing approach and going into mentoring. There's sort of points. Again, it depends on what the individual may develop, who's being coached or mentored, may develop, and you may need to change the approach between the two. I don't think, for me, it's sort of I don't sort of go into a session thinking this person is a mentee or this person is being coached, and that I switch a button in my head. It's just as the situation evolves, just the way that you approach it, the how they're develops your approach between the two. I mean, I'm trained in mentoring and in coaching. I'm obviously not a teacher, but there are some subjects that I know well enough where, and that the person I'm working with doesn't know enough, that requires some projecting, some teaching where they just sort of listen. But that's been, I mean, I haven't done that for a long time. And the last time I did that, it was archery instruction, which is not really that useful in most mentoring sessions, to be honest. But it is a case of that evolving idea of who you're working with and understanding what works, rather than being focused on, we are in a coaching session, we are in a mentoring session. It's just through the principles of mentoring. It's, well, what does my mentee need? And that's the approach we use.
Cool. That's that really sort of brings it all together, what we've been talking about. And I'm going to bring in a couple of experts who are listening in at the moment. They may not realize they're experts, but I know they are. And the first of these is going to be B. B is, oh yes, B is quite an expert and experienced coach. And I'm going to ask for her opinion.
Okay, so it's been very interesting, Stuart, because my coaching journey started a long time ago. Like, you're talking maybe 16, 17 years ago. And mentoring and coaching were two very different things. And to consider yourself a mentor would have been, like you say, you know, I'd have to have the skill or the expertise in that industry or that area to be a mentor. But as you've been speaking, I've literally written down that, you know, mentoring it seems to be changing. It's moving in a new direction. It's not like we would have thought 10 or 15 years ago. And that whole kind of blended modality, because I know I use mentoring in my coaching. And I know that my coaching would have been very much about, it didn't matter what my clients' background was, I could coach them, whether they were teachers or medical field or students. Everybody is coachable if the coach just relates to the individual. Now I can see that blended part of mentoring, and actually life experience can give you a lot more. You know, you've opened my eyes into thinking mentoring is something that I never thought I would be interested in, kind of calling myself or having that as a part of my tools skill set. But I'm very intrigued now.
I mean, it's one of those interesting things. What we found with mentoring, like one course that we provide, which is gives you an example of like how, you know, the experience is sort of takes a back seat compared with the skills you have as a mentor. We have what we call reverse mentoring for senior business leaders, where people who are at the absolute top of a major corporation. I mean, we've done this sort of work with the Home Office before, and with companies like Coca-Cola, where providing mentoring support. But this, where someone who is absolutely at the top of the company, who do they get their mentoring experience from? Or who mentors them? Do we find someone from an even bigger conglomerate? Well, in reality, they just need someone that is allowing them the space to work through the challenge that they're facing. So if we can teach someone to understand, that person can effectively be, forgive the hierarchical thing, below us. If we can disregard that belowness and understand that they're trained to understand, to create that environment, to get the conversation where the mentee works through the issues, then all kinds of possibilities open. I mean, in a practical sense, like I've been working with a lot of, like I said, a lot of businesses, and working with business improvement districts across the UK, where we've been chatting about how we can use owners of small independent businesses that are facing so many stresses at the moment in their industries. It's not just COVID related, but also like in hospitality. The major issue that a lot of people are facing at the moment is a fear that the hospitality industry in the UK particularly is in threat of in a downward turn because of the way that the staff see the industry, and the stresses and strains of one business can be understood, but with a disconnect of another business owner. So two business owners of two completely different industries can mentor each other because they understand what it's like to face those pressures, but they may not be an expert in the same field. That doesn't matter. They understand the stresses, whether it's practical or theoretical. They understand it through training or through their own life experience, but they understand how to create the environment. And that's the key point of mentoring, is the environment you create to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I work a lot with teenagers and young adults, and it's always been from a coaching perspective. But as you're speaking now, I'm thinking of one particular client she's with me 3 years, since she was 13 to 16 now she is. And I feel it's almost mentoring that I've been doing with her, not coaching. That has allowed her the space, the safe space, and the growth that I've seen in her has been her growth, not necessarily, obviously, it's not doing or telling them what to do, but I have seen her grow, that almost I think it's been mentoring than coaching, which is very surreal for me, because I would have never thought about it like that.
Well, that's the thing is, like, mentoring uses a lot of skills of coaching to make it work. I think when you see the difference when it goes from coaching to a more of a mentoring setting is, like you say, that space, that environment where effectively coaching, I mean, this is a big generalization, and I mean no disrespect to anyone, any coach at all, but it's almost like relevant to a particular scenario or task. Like, the big example would be coaching a football team is a good example. But with mentoring, you're using that ability to create the same logic that you've used to coach in one discipline, and then take it out of that session into a completely different discipline. And like you say, that growth in that sense. So it sounds like to me like you've evolved into a mentor, it seems.
Thank you. I feel it now after hearing the way you explained it. Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah.
Thanks, Dean.
And another person I want to bring into this mix is Judith, because Judith is an early learning support assistant. Is that right, Judith?
I am, and I'm in a secondary school as well now.
Cool. Okay.
But yes.
So, I know your background as far as the coaching journey goes, because you've been working through Noble Manhattan. How are you finding your work as a coach within the ELSA environment?
I would say that I think we start off with a child, and I start off kind of coaching them and giving them the skills they need through coaching. And then as you go on and see them, because I do end up seeing them for quite a long time, then it becomes more mentoring, because they have the answers, and then you're trying to get them to work out the answers themselves for situations with friendships or whatever it might be. It's a generalization, but I would say that's my perspective on it. Yeah.
And do you find yourself bringing in sort of your experience in what you do, or do you try and sort of park that to one side?
What do you mean by that, Ian? I'm not sure.
We've been talking really about mentoring, sort of, you have experience which you're using to support your client.
Yes.
Rather than sort of coaching where, as B said, you can go in with a standard coaching system of questioning and listening.
Yes.
How much, if any, do you find that your experience is coming to is coming into play with what you do?
Oh, I'd say quite a lot, to be honest. Yeah, no, I couldn't give it a percentage, because I'm only in a primary school one afternoon a week now, so I'm not doing that much. So my numbers are very small. So it's difficult to say. I think, it's hard to say. It's probably mainly well, it depends on how long you see the child for, because it's usually for a limited period. So I'd start off the coaching. These are the problems, these are the objectives that you want to help the child with, and then when they know what they need to be doing, then you can then mentor them, I suppose. I don't know if that's right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Absolutely. Yeah.
Whereas in the secondary school, like Bea was saying, I find, yeah, it's definitely more mentoring in a way. Yeah, so it's interesting.
Casting the net slightly further afield now, Eugenia, what do you feel about your work? Is it predominantly coaching, is it predominantly mentoring, or what?
Yeah, it's a good question. With young children, I mainly coach. I had 9, 10, 11-year-old children. So, but I also like this mentoring thing when you share your experience, because I don't like to, as I was a teacher, you know, for 18 years, I want to get back from that thing, teaching and the one who knows and the other one that has to listen and just repeat. And I just wanted to get back from that, get away from that. So I also used mentoring with children. I like to share my experiences, and in this way, it's like guiding. It's this soft guiding that I really like, actually. So yeah, I think I do a mixture of both coaching and mentoring, even with young children, actually. And when I ask them what to do, in their opinion, and they don't know, now I mean teenagers, then I give some tools. Of course, that's what we learned in the foundation course. But first I ask them, what could you do in this case to make them reflect? And then I just, share some tools. So I think I do both, yeah.
And I'm just sort of going around everybody at the moment. Ladi, what about you? I'm afraid I don't know much of your background, but do you do you get involved with adolescents and children in this way?
So when I did the foundation course, it was mainly because my children were struggling. I work in a school, and I work with teenagers. I'm not directly coaching them, but I did it for my kids. And I have learned that using the tools and directing them, their actions in a particular direction has really, really helped both my relationship with them and their relationship with each other. So I've got 3 girls, and they're a handful. So yes, and I keep coming back to hear more, because I'm really interested in making this beyond my family, but I want to see them succeed first. And all your words have been super encouraging. So I'll keeping on and maybe widen the pool.
Excellent. Maria, what about you?
So I'm a guidance counselor. I work with students and help them choose universities for usually international university. I'm based in India. I have not done any certification either in coaching or in mentoring, but I think when you're a guidance counselor, you end up, and that's the part where it really resonated. It's like, you're switching multiple hats all the time. So I've been doing this for the last 20 years. And I guess the coaching, mentoring, the distinction, that is what caught my attention. And I've never looked at what I do under the banner of a formal key. Is this coaching? Is this mentoring? Is this teaching? Is this counseling? So it was interesting to me, which is why I ended up signing up for this session. So I haven't done the foundation course. I haven't done any course. This was just a fact-finding kind of a joy for me.
Well, that's absolutely super, because what it means is that we're all coming at this subject from a different direction. It's actually fascinating listening to the directions that people are coming from, as it were. So we're learning from each other as we go, and thank you so much indeed for that. And Sarah, you've asked a couple of things on the chat about could you be a mentor? I know you and I are working very closely together, and certainly from what you say, that you have a tremendous number of skills, having been working with that sort of clientele. for a long time that 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 yes, there are, you know, using your experience at the same time is incredibly useful. But what do you think?
Well, I've worked with learning. I've got a similar background to Stuart, so I understand where he's coming from. I work person-centered. I work with learning disability, challenging behaviour, and complex needs for many years. I've also done a lot of reviews. I've also worked as, like even today, a mentor to a young lady who's very capable, but has got an adult of 7 to 8 years. So, you know, her communication. So, but the thing I'm getting is that I'm not being recognised for those skills that I've got. Do you know what I mean? And I feel that there's a lot of things I can offer, and I have put myself out for it, for the coaching, the thing, but those now have been taken off me and given them to management, even though I'm on a low, because I'm only seen as a support worker. So I feel that I'm being a little bit injustice, just me, and I feel that I've got a lot more to give, but I'm slowly working at it with Noble Manhattan and the coaching, and so that and the mentoring can come together, especially with my passion and my years of working one-to-one, especially with complex needs. So I've learned how to talk through the eyes and the body rather than verbal. I've learned how to do the Makaton. I've learned how to do the BSL. I've learned how, so it's like I've developed that aura around me where they trust me. And I had a gentleman who had got really bad challenging behaviour, never met him, open the door to me today. And they said, oh, that's the first time he's done that. And I felt that there was that compassion, you know what I mean, there. So I'm enjoying working with him because he's keeping me, he's giving me that time and space to be able to work through stuff. Yeah. So I just wondered, I'm looking for doors opening to Sarah to become the best person she can be, you see. So I just think
I mean, you know, that's absolutely wonderful, Sarah. I think the bottom line to your question is, could I be a mentor? I think the bottom line to that one is, yes, you are.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's interesting actually listening to what everyone's been saying. There's a clear theme, which is effectively in different stages of your work. You've been having to become a mentor the long way round, from working as the guidance counselor to yourself working, Sarah, working through your experience and working with your how you're understanding that mindset of the clients you're working with is exactly, you know, with the same backgrounds we come from. That's where I got my understanding from, what led me to becoming a mentor. But also to everyone else was talking about understanding their coaching skills and their experiences and how that's evolved through basically doing the job for a long period of time and evolving it yourself. And this is like you're saying, like recognize what Sarah was saying about recognizing the achievements of that person. This is what we try to do with our training, is basically you've got lots of people doing this role, doing it well, but could do it even better with just the refining, but also the fact that it acknowledges what people have been doing for years, hard work, and not disrespecting what they're doing. Like I feel like I've said a couple of times, but I must stress, I have no disrespect to towards coaching at all. Coaching is a valuable skill, and brilliant coaches are few and far between to find. And it's another form of teaching, another form of coaching, sharing your experiences that can be involved in mentoring. And I think one of the biggest problems that we're facing is that people are being put into a position to do effectively all of your jobs, but without the valuable experience you've gathered or the training that would make up for that experience and sort of balance it out. So going back to your cynicism, Ian, earlier on about people being put in as mentors, you're being put people without all of your speakers' life experience into a role, hoping that just having life experience in general is good enough, when in fact, like Sarah talking about creating that environment where one of her clients who's very non-verbal opens a door for a person, I've been in a similar situation where other members of staff thought I was a wizard because I just understood what a client was talking about, and they felt relaxed about me because I understand that you need to come down and understand their point of view, creating that space, creating that safe space of communication.
I agree.
Without creating those things, you can't work as a mentor, and you do those things. And there is a worry, and I agree with Ian, that people who don't have the experience, don't have the training, and don't understand what actually being a mentor is, or being a coach or a guidance counselor, are being put into those positions. And it's almost like they're set up to fail. And people like yourselves are not being respected with either the simple thing of a qualification being given to you, or the experience of this is what you can do, this is what you achieve. Like, sorry, I don't mean to pick on you at all, Sarah, but your experience was very, very close to my heart, is the fact that you've got all these experiences, then your experience of working with your clients. And it's the same with teachers in the education system, but because you're a lowly support worker, that your responsibility should be given to someone senior. And like I said earlier on, you can have reverse mentoring. It doesn't matter. Mentoring is not about a point of authority. It is about guiding an individual to reach their objectives. And it's just, hopefully we can start as a country, as a community, as a world, understanding mental health and understanding what a mentor does and what people do and how valuable their experience is. But certifying that experience, training new people to understand how valuable that experience is, and putting it down in relevant training is the approach to make mentoring, coaching, mental health leads, whatever, succeed, is understanding that.
I did mention it today to a senior, that there's a lot of human wasted resource within this building.
There's a lot of it across the UK with this sort of thing.
I know,
from healthcare and education, you're completely right. Yeah.
Well, I think that's it's interesting what you say, Stuart, and I think this brings together what the adolescent child coaching support group is all set out to be. It's because it flies under the Noble Manhattan banner, that doesn't mean to say it's all about selling coaching training. Far from it. As far as I'm concerned, I run it, and my objective is far wider than that. My objective is to get people together who are involved in supporting Generation Z and Generation A, who are the current generations going through school, and giving them the skills and the support they need to become great adults, because they're the ones who are going to be ruling the world. And I would like to make sure that they're going to rule the world properly. And it's not just about coaching, it's not just about mentoring, it's not just about counseling, it's not just about therapy, it's about all of these things together. And in a way, it's about, to me, it's about reducing the concentration on academia, and injecting this preparation for life, this preparation for work, so that the students who are struggling because of communication, the instantaneity of communication these days, and the volume of communication, they don't have time to look at a text and say, what does that mean? They only have time to look at it and say, I think it means this, and send off a reply, not having thought it through. And I think that's perhaps one of the biggest things.
Sorry, I just wanted to make a note there. Just this week, and I can find out more information, but there is a new initiative going to be rolled out here in the education system. Just when you speak about it there, you reminded me. And they're going to remove, I don't know how it's going to work, right? But they're going to remove some of the traditional subjects and add in a bit more language and well-being. That's what they're talking about. And initially, it sounds great. It sounds like it's going to be exciting. Not that you take away subjects, but that they're bringing in well-being, let's say. But then when you go a little bit further, it's like they're giving schools, primary and secondary, 7 hours a week to do with what they want. Now, if you've got a school that runs with 1,200 students, which a lot of schools here in Ireland have 1,200 students, 7 hours a week to let teachers decide what they want to do in the whole school. You know, it's like, so I don't know how it's going to roll out. I think it might be, I don't know, I was excited first, but then I was apprehensive afterwards and thinking, it's just another, let's say we're doing this, pop it out there. And, you know, teachers aren't, you know, my daughter's a school teacher. She has a lot of insight in well-being purely because of me being her mom and what we've gone through over the years. But it's not set into her curriculum or into her training to deal with that with her students. So this has to come right back to when we educate our teachers, not necessarily telling our teachers, there you go, that's for you. So it's gonna, I don't know.
It could potentially be
links.
interesting.
Any news, any information on that, B, please send it to me, and
I will. I'll do a little bit of digging.
Invaluable. Yeah, if you could,
I'll do a bit of digging and find out. Yeah,
because that sort of information would be great to push around to increase the flow of even more information around the world.
Well, last year, you know, sorry, not last year. I keep thinking, you know, I blocked out the 3 years that we weren't really in and out of schools. But anyway, prior to that, there was an initiative to roll out 300 hours a month per school for well-being, and that was really exciting when that was first launched, and there was a beautiful big, you know, directive with it and everything was there, but it was handed to schools and said, but you've got to do this yourselves. You know, and that's just, you know, and I thought, here I am, because my PALS program, which stands for Positive Assertive Life Skills, Stuart, I go into schools and I try to deliver that program in the space of a curriculum, but say to them, come on, you know, we just need to bring a little bit of this in so they can do their English better or their Irish better, whatever it might be. So it was kind of, it was like, it just was landed and then forgotten about because teachers aren't skilled in it, or, you know, give them a notebook. Some teachers really want well-being and other teachers just want to do their job and get out. And I understand that as well. So let's see. Yeah,
this is why we've been working with trying to connect mental health leads in the UK, our organisation with the National Network of Mental Health Leads, because on paper it sounded like one of those initiatives, like we've given this many hours, this many pounds, this many, like, to fix mental health. We're going to have one individual in every school from the Department for Education. Every school and college setting must have a mental health lead for the staff and for the students. That's fantastic, but that's them on an island on their own. That doesn't mean this is, they need to, we try to connect them together, because we know if they're not talking to each other, it will become that island. It will just filter out. Going by what you're saying, which I'm very interested in, I'm commenting having not known about that at all, but sorry, that's my door going. I'll have to catch that in a minute. It's just ruined my change of thought. It was I would be more interested to see the money, instead of being told here's 300 hours a month, whatever it is that the new round of teachers are taught mental health skills and mentoring skills as they're teaching.
Yeah.
And so it basically, well-being isn't a session, it's part of the entire day. It's in every class. It's not in one class, it's every class. Yeah. So I'm like you, hearing that just now, I'm very optimistic. That sounds fantastic. Could it be done better? Probably, but I'll wait to see with a bit of optimism.
Right, I think it's time to call a halt. And thanks so much indeed for joining in that discussion, everybody, because it's been absolutely tremendous.